بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. اللهم إني أفتتح الثناء بحمدك وأنت مسدد للصواب بمنك، وأيقنت أنك أنت أرحم الراحمين في موضع العفو والرحمة، وأشد المعاقبين في موضع النكال والنقمة، وأعظم المتجبرين في موضع الكبرياء والعظمة. اللهم أذنت لي في دعائك ومسألتك، فاسمع يا سميع مدحتي، وأجب يا رحيم دعوتي، وأقل يا غفور عثرتي. فكم يا إلهي من كربة قد فرجتها، وهموم قد كشفتها، وعثرة قد أقلتها، ورحمة قد نشرتها، وحلقة بلاء قد فككتها. الحمد لله الذي لم يتخذ صاحبة ولا ولدا، ولم يكن له شريك في الملك، ولم يكن له ولي من الذل، وكبره تكبيرا. الحمد لله بجميع محامده كلها، على جميع نعمه كلها. الحمد لله الذي لا مضاد له في ملكه، ولا منازع له في أمره. الحمد لله الذي لا شريك له في خلقه، ولا شبيه له في عظمته. الحمد لله الفاشي في الخلق أمره وحمده، الظاهر بالكرم مجده، الباسط بالجود يده، الذي لا تنقص خزائنه، ولا تزيده كثرة العطاء إلا جودا وكرما. إنه هو العزيز الوهاب. اللهم إني أسألك قليلا من كثير، مع حاجة بي إليه عظيمة، وغناك عنه قديم، وهو عندي كثير، وهو عليك سهل يسير. اللهم إن عفوك عن ذنبي، وتجاوزك عن خطيئتي، وصفحك عن ظلمي، وسترك على قبيح عملي، وحلمك عن كثير جرمي، عندما كان من خطئي وعمدي. أطمعني في أن أسألك ما لا أستوجبه منك، الذي رزقتني من رحمتك، وأريتني من قدرتك، وعرفتني من إجابتك، فصرت أدعوك آمنا، وأسألك مستأنسا، لا خائفا ولا وجلا، مدلا عليك فيما قصدت فيه إليك. فإن أبطأ عني عتبت بجهلي عليك، ولعل الذي أبطأ عني هو خير لي لعلمك بعاقبة الأمور. فلم أر مولا كريما أصبر على عبد لئيم منك علي يا رب. إنك تدعوني فأولي عنك، وتتحبب إلي فأتبغض إليك، وتتودد إلي فلا أقبل منك، كأن لي التطول عليك، فلم يمنعك ذلك من الرحمة لي والإحسان إلي والتفضل علي بجودك وكرمك. فارحم عبدك الجاهل وجد عليه بفضل إحسانك، إنك جواد كريم. الحمد لله مالك الملك مجري الفلك مسخر الرياح فالق الإصباح ديان الدين رب العالمين. الحمد لله على حلمه بعد علمه، والحمد لله على عفوه بعد قدرته، والحمد لله على طول أناته في غضبه، وهو قادر على ما يريد. الحمد لله خالق الخلق باسط الرزق فالق الإصباح ذي الجلال والإكرام والفضل والإنعام، الذي بعد فلا يرى وقرب فشهد النجوى، تبارك وتعالى. الحمد لله الذي ليس له منازع يعادله، ولا شبيه يشاكله، ولا ظهير يعاضده. قهر بعزته الأعزاء وتواضع لعظمته العظماء، فبلغ بقدرته ما يشاء. الحمد لله الذي يجيبني حين أناديه، ويستر علي كل عورة وأنا أعصيه، ويعظم النعمة علي فلا أجازي. فكم من موهبة هنيئة قد أعطاني، وعظيمة مخوفة قد كفاني، وبهجة مونقة قد أراني. فأثني عليه حامدا وأذكره مسبحا. الحمد لله الذي لا يهتك حجابه، ولا يغلق بابه، ولا يرد سائله، ولا يخيب آمله. الحمد لله الذي يؤمن الخائفين وينجي الصالحين، ويرفع المستضعفين، ويضع المستكبرين، ويهلك ملوكا ويستخلف آخرين. والحمد لله قاصم الجبارين مبير الظالمين مدرك الهاربين نكال الظالمين صريخ المستصرخين، موضع حاجات الطالبين، معتمد المؤمنين. الحمد لله الذي من خشيته ترعد السماء وسكانها، وترجف الأرض وعمارها، وتموج البحار ومن يسبح في غمراتها. الحمد لله الذي هدانا لهذا، وما كنا لنهتدي لولا أن هدانا الله. الحمد لله الذي يخلق ولم يخلق، ويرزق ولا يرزق، ويطعم ولا يطعم، ويميت الأحياء ويحيي الموتى، وهو حي لا يموت، بيده الخير وهو على كل شيء قدير. اللهم صل على محمد عبدك ورسولك وأمينك وصفيك وحبيبك وخيرتك من خلقك وحافظ سرك ومبلغ رسالاتك، أفضل وأحسن وأجمل وأكمل وأزكى وأنمى وأطيب وأطهر وأسنى وأكثر ما صليت وباركت وترحمت وتحننت وسلمت على أحد من عبادك وأنبيائك ورسلك وصفوتك وأهل الكرامة عليك من خلقك. اللهم وصل على علي أمير المؤمنين ووصي رسول رب العالمين، عبدك ووليك وأخي رسولك وحجتك على خلقك وآيتك الكبرى والنبأ العظيم. وصل على الصديقة الطاهرة فاطمة سيدة نساء العالمين. وصل على صبطي الرحمة وإمامي الهدى الحسن والحسين سيدي شباب أهل الجنة. وصل على أئمة المسلمين علي بن الحسين ومحمد بن علي وجعفر بن محمد وموسى بن جعفر وعلي بن موسى ومحمد بن علي وعلي بن محمد والحسن بن علي والخلف الهادي المهدي، حججك على عبادك وأمنائك في بلادك صلاة كثيرة دائمة. اللهم وصل على ولي أمرك القائم المؤمل والعدل المنتظر، وحفه بملائكتك المقربين، وأيده بروح القدس يا رب العالمين. اللهم اجعله الداعي إلى كتابك والقائم بدينك، استخلفه في الأرض كما استخلفت الذين من قبله، مكن له دينه الذي ارتضيته له، أبدله من بعد خوفه أمنا، يعبدك لا يشرك بك شيئا. اللهم أعزه وأعزز به، وانصره وانتصر به، وانصره نصرا عزيزا، وافتح له فتحا يسيرا، واجعل له من لدنك سلطانا نصيرا. اللهم أظهر به دينك وسنة نبيك حتى لا يستخفي بشيء من الحق مخافة أحد من الخلق. اللهم إنا نرغب إليك في دولة كريمة تعز بها الإسلام وأهله وتذل بها النفاق وأهله، وتجعلنا فيها من الدعاة إلى طاعتك والقادة إلى سبيلك، وترزقنا بها كرامة الدنيا والآخرة. اللهم ما عرفتنا من الحق فحملناه، وما قصرنا عنه فبلغناه. اللهم المم به شعثنا واشعب به صدعنا وارتق به فتقنا وكثر به قلتنا وأعزز به ذلتنا وأغن به عائلنا واقض به عن مغرمنا واجبر به فقرنا وسد به خلتنا ويسر به عسرنا وبيض به وجوهنا وفك به أسرنا وأنجح به طلبتنا وأنجز به مواعيدنا واستجب به دعوتنا وأعطنا به سؤلنا وبلغنا به من الدنيا والآخرة آمالنا وأعطنا به فوق رغبتنا يا خير المسؤولين وأوسع المعطين. اشف به صدورنا وأذهب به غيظ قلوبنا واهدنا به لما اختلف فيه من الحق بإذنك، إنك تهدي من تشاء إلى صراط مستقيم. وانصرنا به على عدوك وعدونا إله الحق آمين. اللهم إنا نشكو إليك فقد نبينا صلواتك عليه وآله وغيبة ولينا وكثرة عدونا وقلة عددنا وشدة الفتن بنا وتظاهر الزمان علينا. فصل على محمد وآله وأعنا على ذلك بفتح منك تعجله وبضر تكشفه ونصر تعزه وسلطان حق تظهره ورحمة منك تجللنا وعافية منك تلبسنا برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. صل على محمد وآله الطاهرين.
Assalamu alaikum everyone. Thank you for joining the Hussain Youth live stream for this year's Ramadan lectures with Sheikh Ahmad Bazzi. Now, a few notes before we begin. We kindly ask you to subscribe to our YouTube channel, Hussain Youth, as well as follow us on our Instagram page, Hussain Youth, to stay up to date on all our latest events. Finally, we ask you to email us at youthalhussain@gmail.com your questions right now, as we will be having a question session today after the lecture. And with that, please welcome Sheikh Ahmad Bazzi with a loud salawat.
اللهم صل على محمد. أحسنتم جزاكم الله خير. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم، والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا ونبينا وحبيب قلوبنا أبي القاسم محمد وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجهم ولعن أعداءهم. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. My dear brothers and sisters, may Allah bless you and accept all of your amal on these beautiful days and nights of Shahr Ramadan. And I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make us from those who truly take from the blessings and grow from this beautiful month. And we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to accept all of our amal, our salat, our siyam, bihaqqi Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad mu'ajjal farajahum. The last few days we were speaking about the importance of Shahr Ramadan, the value of Shahr Ramadan, and the value of fasting in Shahr Ramadan, and some of the benefits of fasting, both spiritually and also in our day-to-day lives. We said that fasting plays a role in a person's spiritual journey as it allows a person to reach taqwa. And we said taqwa was this state of being aware of Allah, fearing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, never forgetting about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and ultimately that allows our day-to-day lives to either direct itself towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or at least we go through our day-to-day lives doing what we do, minding our own business, going to work, coming back from work, sitting with the family, playing games, whatever it is. But ultimately, we are aware that Allah Ta'ala is present, and so we will not commit a sin. This is the spiritual goal behind fasting. And we also said one of the other goals of fasting and one of the other benefits of fasting is that a person is so focused on them not having food and drink that they are not focused on committing muharramat. Why? Because their desires are taken away, and essentially their sole attention is on eating and drinking. And so you find that person that is fasting is staying away from muharramat just out of pure nature, not because they are stopping themselves. And also fasting, we said, allows us to feel what others are feeling on a daily basis. The ones that don't have food, the ones that don't have water or anything to drink, people that are poor, we are feeling what they are feeling. And so next time when we have money or we are able to help, because we felt what they felt, we are able then to convince ourselves essentially to give to the poor and not necessarily to do what we want with that money. And so it's a community building effort, just the same as it is a individual journey, as we say, or individual effort to grow oneself. Jami, today, my brothers and sisters, we are going to be discussing some of the ahkam, some of the rulings pertaining to siyam. When it comes to the rulings pertaining to siyam, to fasting, there are many different rulings and many different issues that we can discuss. I'm not going to center the discussion on one group of rulings, for example, not only on mufattirat, things that break the fast, or not only on how do we know when to begin fasting and when to end fasting. I'm not going to be focused on one group. Rather, I'm going to take a little bit from each group of the ahkam, the most important issues, and discuss them with you, inshallah ta'ala. And if there's anything that I say in this discussion, in this lecture, that you don't understand or you have a follow-up question about, write it down, and in the question and answer session after, please ask the question and I will answer it if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allows me to do so. Again, when it comes to fiqh, I want to just stress a point that I usually stress, or I wish to stress at least in this session a lot, and that is, when it comes to jurisprudence, we have maraja. We have scholars that we go back to, experts in the field, that give us our ahkam. Sometimes the maraja will differ on certain details of certain rulings. And so with the rulings that I'm going to be giving you guys today, inshallah, are based on the fatwa of Sayyid Ali Sistani. This is my old Hausa book that I used to study in maybe 5 or so years ago. So it's pretty much shredded. And anybody that goes to University knows the feeling of having a nice, beautiful textbook at the beginning of the year, and then by year 2 or 3, it pretty much looks like this. It's all taped up and scribbled on. But I'm going to be giving you guys the ahkam of Sayyid Sistani on fasting. And if there is a difference of opinion on a certain issue, I will either, if I know that there is a difference of opinion on an issue, I will either say that on this issue some of the scholars have differed, or if you don't do taqleed for Sayyid Sistani, just make sure of your ahkam later on, or write them down, pose them. If I know the answer for that marja, I will give them to you. If not, I will respond to you the following day, inshallah ta'ala. I'll do my own research and respond, inshallah ta'ala. If that's good with everybody, we will begin with a loud salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad wa ajil. Jameel. When it comes to fasting, we know that fasting is not a daily obligation that we have. Fasting, my brothers and sisters, is not like salat, and not like, for example, being good to our parents. It's not like the other mandatory obligations that we have. Things that you must do either at every point in your life, as in being good to your mother and father, obeying them, for example, or at certain parts of the day like salat. Siyam is one of those mandatory obligations that is done once in the year, or at least for a certain portion of the year, and that is in a month called Shahr Ramadan that we know. Jameel. In saying that, we have to understand and we have to know, we have to have a method by which we can pinpoint the beginning of the obligation and the end of that obligation, the beginning of Psalm and the end of Psalm. So if I take the same idea, the same point, and reflect it on Salat. Salat is not at any time during the day. It's at certain parts of the day that you pray Salat al-Fajr, that you pray Salat al-Dhuhr, that you pray Salat al-Maghrib, etc., etc. These salawat have certain time periods, a beginning and an end. For Salat al-Dhuhr, for example, Salat al-Dhuhr is when the sun is at its highest point and begins to dip towards the west. Right when it starts to go towards the west, that's when Salat al-Dhuhr begins. Salat al-Dhuhr ends when the sun goes under the horizon and the redness on the eastern end of the sky is gone. If you look up in the sky around Maghrib time, if after the lecture, if you go up to the second floor of your house, look up in the sky, you're going to see that it's red in certain places. On the eastern end of the sky, if you look on the eastern end, east, there's redness in the sky. When that redness goes away and the sun goes under the horizon, that is Maghrib time. Jameel. So the Sharia, our religion, told us Salat al-Dhuhr begins when you see the sun go down from the highest point in the sky. And also it told us Salat al-Maghrib begins when the sun goes under the horizon and you stop seeing the eastern redness. On Maghrib time, there is some difference of opinion between our ulama. I'm not going to get into it because it doesn't necessarily have to do with fasting. But why did I use that example? It's because the same way that we have certain ways to know when Salat al-Dhuhr begins and when Salat al-Dhuhr ends, we also have a method to know when Shahr Ramadan begins and when Shahr Ramadan ends. We have a method. And that method is given to us by our Sharia and given to us by our Imams alayhimus salam. And a point that I want to make here, and this one is more for the older audience, but please pay attention. Because this obligation is for the young, the old, the man, the woman, the educated, the uneducated, the method that we pinpoint the beginning of the month and the end of the month should be a method that any person can use. The same way that Salat al-Dhuhr, I look up at the sun and when I see it dip towards the east, khalas, I consider myself to have begun the time of Salat al-Dhuhr. This method, by pinpoint the beginning and the end of salat, could be done by anybody. It doesn't need an expert, and please pay attention, it doesn't need an expert for us to know when salat al-dhuhr begins and when salat al-dhuhr ends. Any person just looking at the sky is able to pinpoint when the time of dhuhr begins and when the time of dhuhr ends. In the same way, when it comes to... Sorry, just give me a second, Ikhwan. Sorry, give me 1 second. I apologize. We just had a very important phone call that was just made, health issues. So I need your dua. Sallu ala Muhammad wa alihi. Jameel. Okay, so the same idea applies to Shahr Ramadan, my brothers and sisters. The same idea applies for Shahr Ramadan, and that is to begin Shahr Ramadan and to end Shahr Ramadan. We have to have a method that any person is able to use, any person is able to comprehend, understand, and utilize. Jameel. How is it that we know the beginning of the Shahr Ramadan and the end of Shahr Ramadan? The method, my brothers and sisters, is very simple. When we see the moon, with our naked eye, and the moon is in a certain way, we know that if it's the 29th of Sha'ban, we know that the moon is supposed to look a certain way. It's like a sliver in the sky, a very small sliver in the sky, and it's just over the horizon. Just over the horizon. When we see that moon with our naked eye, not through a telescope, not through anything else, any other method, not through your phone that will allow you to see. No, you have to see with your naked eye. When you see the moon with your naked eye, that's when you know the next day is the beginning of Shahr Ramadan. So the 29th of Sha'ban, I go up on the hills here around Windsor. I look up at the sky. I know the moon is going to be in this area of the sky. When I see the moon with my naked eye, I'm able to say the next day is Shahr Ramadan. And the same logic applies at the end of Shahr Ramadan, the 29th of Shahr Ramadan. I go up. If I see the moon in the sky, then I know the next day is 1st of Shawwal, which is Eid. If I don't see the moon in the sky, then I'm going to have to consider the next day as the 30th of Shahr Ramadan, or 30th of Sha'ban if we're discussing the beginning of Shahr Ramadan. And then the day after that has to be the beginning of the next month, the beginning of Shahr Ramadan in the case of the end of Sha'ban, or the day of Eid in the case of the end of Shahr Ramadan itself. Jameel. If we have to see it with the naked eye, the question is, sometimes I don't go outside and I don't see the moon, but I'm told by my parents that tomorrow is the beginning of Shahr Ramadan. Tomorrow is the beginning of Shahr Ramadan. Does that mean that my fasting was wrong? Does that mean my fasting was okay? What do we do? The answer is, my brothers and sisters, simple. Simple. If your parents are telling you that tomorrow is the beginning of Shahr Ramadan, and they are going off of a testimony, someone said, I saw the moon. Someone said, I saw the moon, and your parents took the word of that individual because they are what we call adil, trustworthy. They do the wajib, they leave the haram, and their word is enough for us to depend on it. And not just one person said it, but two adil people, two just individuals came and said, we saw the moon, and there's no reason for us to doubt what they said. Then even if your parents come and tell you what they said to them, you're okay, you're good. So if you yourself don't see the moon, then if two just individuals, people that are religious, people that do the wajib, leave the haram, don't lie, if they come and tell you, hey, we saw the moon, then you can go by their testimony, even if you don't see the moon. Jameel. On this issue, there is some difference of opinion when it comes to some cities being able to see the moon and other cities not being able to see the moon. For example, I live in Windsor. Some of you are living in Toronto. Between Windsor and Toronto, there are 4 hours. 4 hours by drive. Jameel. If I see the moon here, pay attention to what I'm saying. If I see the moon here, okay, in Windsor, I see the moon. Does that mean the person in Toronto will be able to see the moon? Yes or no? The ulama have said, there are certain areas, certain parts of the world, if two different cities in that area look and see the sky, see the moon, they will both be looking at the same thing. They will both be seeing the same exact thing at the same time. And then some ulama said, there are other parts in the world. If one city sees the moon, it doesn't mean the other city will be seeing the moon. They will not be looking at the same thing, because there are different horizons on the globe. So me seeing the moon here in Windsor doesn't mean the person all the way in Australia will see what I see in the sky. And so the ulama have differed and said, Tayyib, that circle, the circle that allows two different cities to see the same point in the sky, how big is that circle? Yani from here to Windsor, if we look up at the sky, we will see the moon together, because we are looking at the same patch of the sky. Jameel. But me in Australia, do we see the same part of the sky? Do we see the same moon in the same night or no? For Sayyid Sistani, he says the circle is very small. So between here and Toronto, yes, if I see the moon, then it means the people in Toronto should be able to see the moon. If they don't see the moon, then they can go by my testimony. They can go by what I saw. But a person that's living in Australia and me, no. What I see doesn't mean what they are able to see. So if I see the moon, it doesn't mean they can do iftar, or if they see the moon, it doesn't mean that I can do iftar upon their testimony, because the circle is small. Windsor is here, Australia is here, and the circle is small that allows one city to take from the testimony of another city. Sayyid al-Khou'i, for example, he says no. Sayyid al-Khou'i says the circle is much bigger. Sheikh Bashir al-Najafi says the circle is the entire globe. If one part of the world sees it, it's Eid for the entire globe. So depending on your marja, depending on what your marja says, you will follow. And most of the mu'mineen, most of the people don't really have to do all of this stuff. They just take it from their local scholar or from the group of ulama, the group of ulama that essentially take all of the testimonies and give a final verdict on when the beginning or the end of Shahr Ramadan is, or a report rather, not a verdict. Jameel. That is when it comes to the beginning and the end of Shahr Ramadan. And maybe during the end of Shahr Ramadan, I will have an in-depth look on this issue and explain it thoroughly with a board and sort of illustrate. So even if you didn't understand certain parts, no problem. I will have an in-depth discussion inshallah on this topic, where I will bring the riwayat from Wasa'il al-Shia and probably some other books, but most of them are in Wasa'il al-Shia. I will bring them and read them to you inshallah, so you can know exactly what it is that our ulama are discussing when they discuss this issue. Jameel. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Next, we're going to be discussing the conditions of the person who must fast. If they have these conditions, then they must fast. If you don't have these conditions, then you are not allowed to fast. So we say shara'at as-siyam or shara'at as-sawm. These are the conditions that one must have to fast. Okay. The first one is al-bulugh. They are baligh. They have gotten to an age where it is wajib upon them to do all of the takalif, all of the obligations like salat, sawm, hajj. All of the different obligations become mandatory, wajib on a person when they reach a certain age, or certain things happen in them, in their lives, to themselves, that essentially take them from the place of being a child to being a person that is mukallaf, a person that is able now to hold the obligation. In terms of the age, the age for the girl is 9 years in solar years, not in the regular, or the lunar years rather, not solar years. And I'll explain the difference in a bit. And for the man or for the boy, it's 15 years of age, going off of the lunar calendar, not the solar calendar. How much is that in our regular years that me and you use? I don't want to confuse you and explain the exact difference between both of them, but how much is the difference between the two? When it comes to our years, if a girl is 8.5, give or take, she must begin fasting and praying. If the boy is 14.5, give or take, maybe a little bit more than 14.5, but in and around there, then he must begin to pray and to fast. Jameel. There are other signs as well for the boy that make him baligh, but I'm not going to discuss them today. When it comes to the ages, it's very simple. If any of the other signs happen, then that person is baligh, even if they are not 15 years of age. Jameel. The second one is al-aql, so sanity, that a person has the ability to make a choice. The person is sound of mind. Thirdly, we have adam al-darar. What's adam al-darar? That fasting doesn't harm you. Now I want you to pay attention for a second. That fasting doesn't cause bodily harm to you or to your wife, mathalan, or your kids if you have a family. Let's talk about yourself, only you, or the person himself. When we talk about harm, my brothers and sisters, we are talking about harm that is considered A, too much to bear, B, harm that can cause you to lose your life, to die, or C, harm that will cause you to lose a limb or one of your 5 senses. That is the harm that we are talking about when it comes to someone leaving an obligation such as fasting. Tayyib, we ask the ulama, Tayyib, when you say harm, it's very vague. What is it that you're trying to tell us? They say harm is one of 3 things. You want me to define harm for you more? It's one of 3 things. It's intensifying the disease that you have. Let's say someone has a disease. When they fast, it intensifies the disease itself in the body of the person. So it causes it to spread. It causes the situation to become worse in the body of that person. Number 1. Number 2, the disease that you have will become longer to cure, will take longer to cure because of fasting. So let's say you have a disease. وَالْعِيَاذُ بِاللَّهِ بَعِدْ عَنْكُمْ. A person has a disease. It takes 6 months if they take the pills, mathalan, that they have to take. It takes 6 months for them to be cured if they take the pills. If they don't take the pills, it takes 5 years to cure. It takes 5 years to cure. And the disease is an actual real disease that is hindering, that is life altering, not one that a person can deal with, not like a skin rash or something like that. No, something that is actually harmful for the person and something that is considered too much to bear. And putting up with that disease for 5 years is too much to bear. In that case, that is harm. And lastly, by one fasting, the pain from the disease intensifies to a degree that is considered too much to bear. So for example, a person has a disease. If they don't eat, then they fast. And they don't eat, they don't drink, they don't take their medication, they fast. The pain that they will feel is considered too much for a normal human being to bear. Too much for a person to bear. Too much for a person to go through. Now they have a little headache like most of us. They have a little stomach ache like some of us. No. They will have an intense headache to a point where they are screaming, intensifying the pain. So the harm itself must be, number one, too much to bear. Number two, can cause a person to lose their life. Number three, causes a person to lose one of their limbs or one of their 5 senses. How does this harm manifest itself? It's either intensifying the disease, taking or making the disease longer to cure, or bringing about intense pain that is too much to bear. And again, all of these three go back to it being too much to bear, losing a life or losing a limb or a sense, one of the 5 senses. Jameel jidda. This is what harm is. طيب, let's say from fasting I have a headache. I get a headache. Is that enough for me to break my fast? No. Wallah, I take supplements, vitamin supplements. I take iron pills, for example. And I have to take them 3 times a day. If I don't take them, nothing really happens. I get a little tired, but it's not something serious. Can I break my fast to take my supplements? No. You take your supplements before Fajr time, so before Imsak, and after Iftar. As for the pill in the middle of the day, if your doctor says it's okay to skip it or take it in the middle of the night, then you must do that. You must do it, and you're not allowed to break your fast. So when it comes to harm, my brothers and sisters, don't take it lightly. Don't say, well, I'm in a little bit of pain or I'm a little sick, and so I want to break my fast. No, that's not allowed. You have to go through that pain or that hardship that you're going through, unless it gets to a point where you are harming yourself, as we discussed. And so at that point in time, it can become wajib to break your fast. It could become wajib to break your fast. You tell me, Ahmad, طيب, sometimes I don't have pain. Sometimes I don't have this amount of, sometimes I may not have the disease. I don't have the pain, but I fear I have a certain medical condition where I fear that if I don't eat and don't drink, I will have I will get the symptoms again of the disease that I'm going through. So let's say a person has a disease. It's a chronic disease. It's in their body. It doesn't show up except if they don't eat and drink. It doesn't show up unless they don't eat and drink. So this person fears that if they fast, the symptoms will come back and it can cause them to lose a life. It could cause them lose their life. It could cause them to lose a limb. It could cause them to lose one of the senses, or bring about intense hardship that is not considered normal to bear. They don't know that it will happen, but they fear the harm coming about. Here, the ahkam, they say, you knowing or you having fear is the same thing. It's the same thing. Yani, if you fear harm, you are allowed to break your fast. But again, I stress, the harm that we are discussing is not any normal harm. It is a harm that is considered too much to bear, harm that causes death, or harm that causes the loss of the limb or the loss of one of the 5 senses. We will talk about traveling, safar, inshallah ta'ala, and the ahkam, the rulings pertaining to traveling. Inshallah, we will discuss them tomorrow, I believe we do have a lecture tomorrow, or in the next lecture, inshallah ta'ala. I wanted to discuss it today, but because of the little delay, I wasn't able to discuss them today. Inshallah ta'ala, I will be with you on the Zoom call to take any of your questions. And if you're not going to be joining us on the Zoom call, then we will see you in the next session. Bi'awnillah ta'ala. Wa sallallahu ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa alihi tahirin.
Thank you, Sheikh Ahmad Bazzi, for that wonderful lecture. So there's not going to be questions today, or will you be open for questions today? Okay. We're going to open the floor now to questions. We have some questions in the chat. Sister Yasmin asks, what if I didn't see the moon? Do I fast or wait the next day?
So Sister Yasmin, the way that we do this is we ask, number one, did you see the moon? You say, no, I didn't see the moon. Obviously, you went and you checked and you didn't see the moon. No problem. In your city, did two just men come and tell you that we saw the moon? No. None. You have no testimony. No two just men came to you and said, we saw the moon. And when I say just, what do I mean? Yani mutadayyin, yani somebody that does the wajib, leaves the haram, and is trustworthy. This is a person that if they come and they say to you, Yasmin, we saw the moon, and two of the two men come to you and say the same thing, did that happen? You tell me yes or no. If it did happen, then I tell you, okay, then tomorrow you begin fasting, or tomorrow is Eid, depending on when this occurred. You tell me no, I'll tell you no problem. Those two just men, did they go to the scholar, mathalan, of the city that you are in, or mathalan to your mother or to your father or to someone else, and they told them, wallah, we saw the moon? If you tell me yes, that did happen, these two just individuals went to the scholar and told him, and so the scholar has written on WhatsApp or whatever in a report and sent it out, then you go by what the scholar has said. Especially if the scholar is a person that pays attention, that knows the ahkam. They will not send out a letter or send out a message without them having the testimony of those two just individuals. Tayyib, you tell me none of these things happened, Ahmad. I'll tell you no problem. Sister Yasmin, let's say you live in Toronto. Let's just say you live in Toronto. And you do taqleed for Sayyidi Sistani. I'm assuming these two things right now, that you live in Toronto and that you do taqleed for Sayyidi Sistani. I'll tell you, okay, Yasmin, someone from London, Ontario, or someone from Windsor, Ontario, mathalan, or maybe someone even from New York, or someone from Dearborn, which is right across the border from Windsor, or someone from, and sometimes in some years, Florida, mathalan, Florida, which is pretty much in line with Windsor, Toronto, right? It's on the same line, longitudinal line on the globe. Did two just men from those cities look up and see the moon and see it, look up and try to see the moon and actually see it, and they came and testified that we saw it? If yes, then you are allowed to go by their testimony and break your fast. Why? Because you are within that circle. Remember that circle that I was saying? You are within the circle of that city. Yani that city, around it, there's a circle. You are within that circle. That circle means if they see the moon, then whoever's in that circle with them will be able to go by their testimony, will be able to go by what they saw. So I tell you, sister, if you saw the moon, good. If you didn't see the moon, did someone else see the moon and tell you? Two just men come and tell you? Tell me no. Two just men go and tell the scholar, and the scholar came and told you, or sent a message, you tell me no. I tell you, in Toronto, did they see the moon? You tell me no. Windsor, no. London, Ontario, no. Dearborn, no. In some years, Florida, no. Other parts of the US, no. I tell you, if none of these places saw the moon, you didn't see the moon, no testimony, none of this, then you must fast the last day of Shahr Ramadan, and then the day after is Eid. And similarly, if it's at the beginning of Shahr Ramadan, if it's in the beginning, the next day would be the 30th of Sha'ban, and the day after would be the beginning of Shahr Ramadan. I hope I didn't confuse you guys.
Thank you for the response. We have another question. Why is the timing of Ramadan and Eid based on the sighting of the moon? And why is it that Sunnis and Shias tend to differ? So for example, they say that they start Ramadan different days, even though both are looking at the moon. So how can there be differences? Why does it have to be based on the moon sightings?
Jameen. As for the difference between the Sunnis and the Shias on this issue, our fellow brothers and sisters from the Sunni side, they use different methods to pinpoint the beginning of the month. So they will use calculations. They will not necessarily even look at the moon. They don't even have to look at the moon. They will use certain calculations and even some computer programs that will tell them that the moon is in this way or looks like this in the sky at this point in time. So that's why there's a difference of opinion. So when you go to the Sunnis, they will go on NASA websites or the other websites, the European Union websites, whatever they are. Not the European Union, the European Space Station or something. One of these other websites that will tell them, according to certain calculations, according to certain modeling, that the moon is in this manner, in the sky on this day during this time. Okay? As for the Shias, we said no. We said no. Our sources tell us that you must see the moon with the naked eye. And if I had Wasa'il al-Shia in front of you, I would read you, I believe I counted 11 or 12 different riwayat that come and say that you must see the moon with your eye. Sum lil-ru'ya wa aftar lil-ru'ya aw li-ru'yatih. I'm not going to quote the exact riwayah because I'm fasting, unless I have it in front of me. But there are 11 or 12 different riwayat that say the exact same thing. Fast when you see the moon and break your fast when you see the moon. طيب, these riwayat, are they sahih? Are they acceptable? Do we accept them? Are they authentic? We say yes. Are they from different? I believe yes. Multiple different imams telling us the same exact thing. And we also have riwayat that say, do not use those different methods that will try to pinpoint for you when the moon is actually born. There's a riwayah that says you are not allowed to use different methods other than seeing the moon itself. Those methods are not to be used. The only method is to see the moon or to go by the testimony of someone who saw them. Okay, so our riwayat on this are very clear, and that's why you see none of our maraja use those different methods. Our maraja use the methods that the imams alayhimus salam, or the method that the imam alayhis salam told us to see the moon with the naked eye, or go by the testimony of someone that saw the moon. And if you don't see the moon, then go to the last day of Shahr Ramadan, which is the 30th, and then the day after that is Eid. And similarly when it comes to Sha'ban.
Thank you. We have another question. What if you are fasting and your head hurts, so you break your fast? Do you have to redo a month of fasting, or what is it they have to do?
Okay. So a person that has a headache and they break their fast, okay? Number one, they're not allowed to break their fast just for a headache, unless the headache is pain that is considered too much to bear, or a person's literally screaming and they're about to rip their hair out. Like this is the amount of pain that a person must be going through. A person has a normal regular headache, they break their fast. طيب, did they break their fast thinking that they are allowed to break their fast? Or they broke their fast knowing they're not allowed to break their fast, but they just don't want to put up with the headache? Assuming that it's the latter, assuming that they just didn't want to put up with the fasting, this person is considered to have broken their fast intentionally when they're not allowed to. And so they have to pay what we call kafara. A kafara, my brothers and sisters, is what you would consider to be a penalty. And this penalty is one of three things. Number one, freeing a slave when we don't have slaves. So don't go and try to find a slave and buy them and free them, because it doesn't work in today's day and age. So X that one out. You can't really do that one. But the riwayat say freeing a slave, which you can't really do. Or siyam shahrayn mutatabi'ain, fasting 2 months consecutively. And there are ahkam as to how it should be done. I'm not going to get into it now, but essentially fasting 2 months. Okay. And lastly, it'am 16 miskin, feeding 60 very, very poor people. Okay. Miskin is different than faqir. Faqir is a poor person. Miskeen is someone that's very, very poor. The faqir is defined as someone that doesn't have the ability to sustain themselves for a year. So they don't have a job or they don't have money to sustain themselves, to keep themselves comfortable or to eat and drink and live regularly for a year. That is a faqir. A miskeen is a person that can't sustain themselves for a day or two. So someone who's homeless on the street. That is a miskeen. So it's either صيام شهرين متتابعين or إطعام 60 miskin, fasting 2 months, or feeding 60 very, very, very poor people. That is for someone that broke their fast, knowing they're not allowed to break their fast, knowing that they're not allowed to break their fast, but they did it anyway. As for the person who thought that they can break their fast, they have other ahkam. I will get the details for you, inshallah ta'ala, because I don't want to quote anything that I'm not entirely sure of. I will get the ahkam for you, inshallah. Next session, I will present that hukum, inshallah ta'ala.
Thank you. We have another question. One person asks, why can't you fast on Eid?
Hussain, that's a very good question. Simply put, because the riwayat tell us that you're not allowed to fast on Eid. So the hadith from the imams tell us that you're not allowed to fast on Eid. On that specific day, it's haram to fast. On that specific day, it's haram to fast. The same way that in the middle of the night, it's haram to pray Salat al-Dhuhr. If you are saying now is Salat, no, now is Salat al-Dhuhr, and I'm going to pray Salat al-Dhuhr now. Salat itself is wajib. But to do it at a time that it's not prescribed for, knowing that it's not prescribed for that time, and thinking that it's enough, and thinking that it will be accepted, and believing that it will be accepted, knowing that it's haram to do so, it's not right, is haram itself. So if I want to get up at 3 a.m. and to pray and say I'm going to pray Salat al-Dhuhr at 3 a.m. and I believe that this is what I should be doing, and I know that Salat al-Dhuhr is not at 3 a.m. By me praying Salat al-Dhuhr, I'm doing haram. We call this tashriya, and it's haram. Okay, so the riwayat are very clear that fasting on this day is haram. Fasting a day before is wajib. Fasting a day after is mustahab. But on that day, Eid al-Fitr yani, it's haram to fast. So before that command, that straightforward command, we say khalas. On that day, we're not allowed to fast. Although just the day before it was wajib. Okay?
Thank you. And Sajjad asks a question. He's 9 years old and he's fasting. So he's wondering if it's okay to fast, even though he's not baligh.
Yes, it's okay to fast as long as you're not going to harm yourself, which usually for someone that's not 9 years old, it's not going to harm them. And this is assuming that Sajjad is not baligh yet. He's 9 years old. Assuming that he's not baligh, this amal that you're doing, this action that you're doing, the fasting that you are doing is ultimately good for you. Some riwayat, I believe, some narrations say that a person who fasts or a person who does some of the wajibat before they are baligh, the rewards, if not all of them, then at least some of them go to the parents as well. So by you fasting, you are essentially gifting your parents rewards. So that's very good. And also it's good for you because it allows you to get yourself used to fasting for when it becomes wajib on you, assuming that you are not actually baligh. So it's very good. Jazakallah khair.
Thank you. One person asks, can you elaborate why Islam has 1 month of fasting and others such as Hinduism and Jewish fast, they fast less? And if there's like different ways of fasting, meaning like sunrise or sunset, and like the certain restrictions that Muslims have. So can you just elaborate on like Islam compared to like other, let's say, religions?
That's a very good question. That itself probably needs a whole lecture. And probably needs me to sit and research what the other religions do. I will be honest with you that I didn't even know that Hindus fast. I had no idea that Hindus fast, even for a week or 2 weeks or however long they fast. I didn't even know this. This is my own ignorance on the issue. And similarly, Jewish people, I didn't know that they fasted either. If they do, I don't know if it's the same way that we fast. But I know our fellow Christian. Our fellow Christians, they fast in some way, and not necessarily fasting the way we do, but I believe they observe something called Lent, which they stay away from certain things that they like for a certain period of time. They observe this. I'm not exactly sure why. Again, I'm ignorant on this, and I will come out and say I'm ignorant on certain details of other religions and some of their practices. But I know that they observe certain types of fasting. Our fasting, my brothers and sisters, is one that stands out amongst religions. It stands out amongst religions. Even non-Muslims know that we fast, and they know that we fast from sunrise to sunset, although sunrise to sunset is wrong. It's from Fajr to Maghrib, because sunrise is ash-shuruq, which is about an hour or so after Fajr. And sunset is not necessarily, according to some ulama, not necessarily when Maghrib time begins. There's a difference of opinion there that I'm not going to get into. But Muslims are generally known for their fasting, okay, and the way that we fast. So our type of fasting is special and is not one that is observed by other religions, unless there are certain groups of that religion that do it the same way, then that's great. But Muslims are known for the way that they fast. And most people think that fasting is staying away from eating and drinking. Inshallah, in the upcoming sessions, we will learn that fasting is not just staying away from eating and drinking. There are many mufattirat. There are more than one, or more than two, rather. More than those two things that break our fast. And we will discuss what those things are, inshallah ta'ala, or at least some of them. Some of them we are not going to discuss, but some of the other ones that we are able to discuss online, we will discuss, inshallah ta'ala. And that is what differentiates our fasting from the other types of fasting that other groups observe.
So for my last question, there's actually two questions, but I'm just gonna compile them into one, so it's just a bit easier. So I'm gonna ask you, and then you're just gonna give me the response. So because there's like a list of them, it's for fasting and whether it breaks it or not. So the first one is, can we brush our teeth while fasting?
Yes, you can brush your teeth. Just watch out when it comes to the toothpaste that you don't swallow it, or the water on the toothbrush that you don't swallow it. Okay. I advise my brothers and sisters to do this. I advise my brothers and sisters to wash your teeth, or brush your teeth, before you do wudu for salat. Okay. Why I advise this, I'll leave it for another time, but just I advise you to do it in this way. And try not to use a lot of toothpaste, because if it gets a lot in your mouth, then you will swallow. And in certain situations, by you putting water in your mouth when you don't have to, and you accidentally swallow it, it will break your fast. You will have to redo that day later. Okay. So there are certain situations, if you put water in your mouth intentionally, okay, intentionally putting water in your mouth, and you swallow it on accident, you have to redo that fast after Shahr Ramadan. Now, the ulama, they say if you put water in your mouth for doing wudu, because it's mustahab to put water in your mouth before you do wudu, and you accidentally swallow some of that water, you don't break your fast. So that's why I say, if you want to brush your teeth before wudu, that's your best bet. Not to say that if you swallow here, you won't have to, you don't have to redo you don't have to redo the fast. But for now, until I get the details on this matter specifically, just brush your teeth before you do wudu for salat. That's your best bet. And if you can stay away from brushing specifically your tongue, do that. Brush only your teeth, right? And then put water in your mouth 3 times, and put water in your mouth, spit it out, water in your mouth, spit it out, and have that actually putting water in your mouth and spitting it out, sorry. Do it right before you do wudu. Okay.
Another one is it okay to go swimming while fasting?
Swimming while fasting, you shouldn't. You shouldn't swim while fasting. And according to some of the ulama, if not the majority of the ulama, I believe, if you put your head underwater during fasting, it will break your fast. Sayyid Sistani says it doesn't break your fast, but he considers it to be extremely makruh, like extremely disliked, but it doesn't break your fast. Other ulama, they say no, it does break your fast. So putting your head or your whole body underwater, okay, that breaks your fast on many of the other scholars, or in many of the other scholars' opinions. Okay, so swimming and going underwater, you should not be doing during fast.
Sorry, what is the last one is, what is the ruling about chewing gum while fasting? This is the last one.
Stay away from it, because in the gum itself there's sugar, and that sugar will break your fast. So there's a taste from gum, yes, so it will break your fast. Some say that there are certain types of gums that have no taste and have no additives, so none of the stuff from the gum will actually go into your saliva and you swallow. So it's just something to chew on. I personally haven't seen that in Canada. I don't think there is any of that in Canada. If there is, there's no need to chew it anyway. It's probably just going to make you thirstier. I'm not sure why a person would want to chew it. But the gum that we have here absolutely breaks your fast.
All right, thank you. So I guess that wraps up our Q&A session. Thank you, Sheikh Ahmad Bazzi, for enlightening us, and thank you everyone who is listening right now. Don't forget to follow us on Instagram and subscribe to us on YouTube, and email us your questions through our email youthalhussain@gmail.com ahead of time for the next question session. Now, finally, please remember to join the live stream tomorrow at 6:40 p.m. where we will have Dua Iftitah. And with that, we look forward to seeing you at tomorrow's sessions, inshallah. Thank you.
Jazakumullah khair.